Hello, my sober lovelies. Before we dive in, I'm really excited to announce my group coaching program for women is live, and you can join now. So excited for this because let's be real here. Quitting drinking isn't just about saying no to the glass of wine or booze. It's about what comes after. All the fear, the boredom, the late night anxiety, and the stories you've been telling yourself for years. And that's where my Rewired Sober group coaching program for women comes in. It's only $247. I'm being totally transparent on the price. It's for 3 months, and you'll learn how to shift your mindset, build habits that actually stick, and question the core beliefs that have been keeping you stuck, and find healthier ways to deal with that loneliness and that now what feeling. The best part is you don't have to do it alone. We'll have live group coaching sessions weekly, and there'll be a bunch of women walking through it with you. It's not another cookie cutter sobriety program for mommy vloggers. It's neuroscience meets real life, and it's designed for women to help you not just stay sober, but actually feel good living sober. You can join anytime, and I'd love to see you on the inside. So start today, get instant access. The link's in the show notes. Welcome to Rewired Sober, the podcast where we unpack what it really takes to rewire your brain after alcohol. Hi, I'm your host, Kate Vitella, a registered nurse, board certified in mental health and addiction, sober since 2018, and a coach who blends neuroscience, lived experience, and real talk to help women break the shame spiral and rebuild their thinking with tools like journaling, humor, and honest conversation. This isn't surface level sobriety. This is where the healing gets deep, grounded, and unapologetically honest. So let's get into it. Welcome back to another episode of Rewired Sober. It's just me going solo here. I wanted to record this episode because it is October 4th, and we are coming into the holidays. So I want to talk about family dynamics in sobriety because, oh my God, is this a loaded topic. And I don't care if you come from like a Brady Bunch-esque type family or like straight up gangster or straight up chaos. When one person in the family gets sober, the whole family system feels it. And, spoiler alert of my previous podcast, it's not always applause and hugs. No one's bringing you a fucking casserole. Sometimes it's a lot of side eyes and a lot of weird comments and a lot of guilt tripping and drinking around you and odd dynamics. So I'm going to try to bring a little levity and snark to this and also some compassion here. And I want to kind of share why families react the way they do, and how theory and psychology actually do explain this from all the way back into the 30s into modern day. And for me personally, how I got to a place of self-compassion and forgiveness and understanding for my family. I know, barf, but I get him now. I get the whole thing. And trust me when I say this didn't happen overnight. I'm coming up on 8 years of sobriety, and this has been a process. It still is. It's an ongoing journey of understanding my family dynamics. But guess what? I'm sober. I'm clear-minded. I get to step back and watch everything unfold. And that feels kind of like a gift. I mean, even in the chaos of family events and holidays, it still feels really good to me to have a bigger sense of understanding and appreciation for my family. And I was really prompted to record this episode after I was on a women's meeting and great advice was given, right? It's not you, it's them. That's awesome advice. When you're getting sober, you're holding up a mirror and, take nothing personally, as Dr. Don Miguel Ruiz, wait, is he a doctor? No, he's not. Miguel Ruiz, in his book, The Four Agreements, talks about, taking nothing personally. And that's really kind of what you have to do on this journey, because it's so not about you. It's your family's going to say and deflect and react, and there are all kinds of weird shit's going to come up about your sobriety that has really nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with their insecurities and their bullshit. And of course, you're breaking all the generational cycles and all the tropes about, you know, you're breaking the curse. And what I said in the meeting, maybe I'm a Debbie Downer or maybe I'm just a realist, but we can say all this in, our intellectual mind. We absolutely understand this isn't about me. This is Aunt Linda's insecurity or Uncle Bob's own issues with his diabetes and all the shit. And yet it still hurts. And it's still hard to go through all this stuff. There can be so much loneliness when you're the only one that is on a sober journey and you're at family gatherings. I mean, I never thought I would experience loneliness in a crowd like I did in early sobriety. And even sometimes to this day, because I'm maybe the only one at a work function or a giant gathering. And I have this little inner knowing of my story, my boundaries, my safe bubble. And yet I look around and no one else knows that version of me, and no one else knows anything about my sobriety and where I came from. And that can feel a little bit lonely. It just can. And I've learned ways to stay anchored in my truth and kind of stabilize my nervous system over time. But so first I want to go into, of course, I did some research on this because I'm not just going to rant about my own family because, you know, that's helpful to the degree of me too, but it's not helpful in the sense of explaining really this whole thing as a big picture. So Dr. Murray Bowen, he's this American psychiatrist from like way back. And he was kind of the pioneer of the family systems theories. He wrote about this like way back in the 70s. And he really kind of unpacked how families work like a living organism. Like, right, everybody has their role in the family. There's the caretaker, the scapegoat, the rebel. I'm pointing at myself, even though you can't see me, and like the peacekeeper. And when one person changes, it's like a domino effect. And then the family system scrambles to sort of restore that old balance. And when I was looking into this research, I was thinking, your sobriety isn't just about you. It threatens the whole choreography, the whole dance, the whole ecosystem of how your family has operated. And maybe your family doesn't even realize they're doing it. It's unconscious. But when you stop sort of playing your part in that whole old dance, everyone feels the tension. And that's why sometimes maybe your family feels uncomfortable around you. They feel uncomfortable with your sobriety, maybe even more so than when you were drinking. Because at least the drinking you was predictable, right? Everybody knew their place in the chaos. And, it's the devil we know. So, if I'm looking at my family, like, how every family has its rituals and their little customs, like Aunt Linda, I'm just going to say Linda's her name. That's not really her name, but I really like the idea of being like, listen, Linda. Anyway. Okay, so Aunt Linda, she always brings like this really weird Jello salad-esque dish. Uncle Bob always falls asleep during the game, right? It's sort of like those same things that go on, a theme. And me, I used to be the one who's sort of like double fisting the Pinot Grigio before the turkey's even carved. We're at Thanksgiving dinner. I'm wearing what I think is a fabulous outfit. Maybe it's a little slutty. I already reek like alcohol and yesterday's eyeliner and bad, night out at the bar. But that was my role, you see. I was like the fun, chaotic one, like the aunt that just kind of rolled in, although stylish. I feel like I made everyone else in my family feel more normal, feel more grounded, and more in their roles. Like, because I had my place and they had theirs. And and so when I got sober, you know, picture me showing up to Thanksgiving dinner and I've got my LaCroix, my NA beverages, my own snacks, and suddenly the whole room gets nervous. The table gets nervous. You know, Aunt Linda's clutching onto her nasty ass Riesling like it's her emotional support animal because she's used to pointing at my fifth glass of Pinot Grigio to justify her own shit, her own drinking. Maybe she even hides her second or third or fourth glass behind, like, oh, look at Kate, And now Aunt Linda's exposed. And what happens, right? The comments start coming out like, "Oh, you were funner when you drank," or "You're not as fun without the wine," or, even nasty comments came to me like, "Aren't you gonna go to one more of those meetings? And isn't it boring drinking soda instead of wine?" And, that's not about me, right? That's the family system trying to shove me back into my old role. Not out of spite, but here's the truth, like, families, they crave homeostasis, they crave balance. I mean, this is what, Dr. Bowen was talking about, even if the balance is totally dysfunctional. So I want you to kind of imagine yourself thinking about walking into these family gatherings and, you've got your assortment of beverages. I like to say BYOE, bring your own everything. I don't fuck around waiting to see what other kind of drinks people have. I bring my own seltzers. I have favorite NA beverages I bring. I like little snack mixes. Sometimes I'll even bring my own music just to kind of, you know, keep my keep my world spinning without upsetting it too much, because I still wanna have fun too, right? And so, as you go into these family events, just try to keep in mind how much your sobriety is gonna fuck their shit up. Now, is that your problem? No! You're saving your own life. You're doing one of the hardest things ever to do. But, of course, there's gonna be so much trickle down with the family. And I don't wanna go too much into Dr. Bowen's teachings because honestly, like, it was a long time ago, even though very, very relevant. But the high level overview is your sobriety is a threat to the old normal. And sometimes even in family dynamics, their silence reflects more about how uncomfortable they feel. I remember wanting to talk about my recovery to my family. I wanted it to come up. Maybe sort of like I wanted to get pulled over and do a breathalyzer. I was anxious to prove. I wanted to tell them I had 172 days and I go to these meetings and I've learned this about alcohol. And yet no one fucking asked me. In fact, they said nothing about any of it, like it never happened. Like, talking about my sobriety was kind of taboo, at least in the beginning, right? Until we had gotten a little more settled into the fact that I had changed my roles. And now I'm really fortunate to have a family around me that is mostly sober. I've talked on previous podcasts, like my sister quit drinking a couple months after I did, and my mom quit, and my stepdad quit. And for the most part, family gatherings are, we don't, there's alcohol, yeah, but like there's also a ton of non alcoholic options, and we have just as much fun without it. But if I go into like what I think is relevant to today, especially, I coach women, and my sobriety group in the Rewired Sober container is all women. And we talk a lot about our roles in the family. And I really love Harriet Lerner's teachings. She wrote The Dance of Anger and The Dance of Intimacy. And I feel like she kind of modernized Dr. Bowen's ideas and put them into more like everyday language, especially for women. And she says, like, in a family dynamic, when a woman changes their role, like when a woman stops over functioning, or they stop playing the peacekeeper, or they start speaking their truth, family maybe doesn't throw a parade for you, right? They're going to push back. And Harriet Lerner's words are change, no matter how positive, will always be met with resistance, right? And she's right. The family wants you to go back to being the fun, messy drunk. or whatever version of you that was. Like maybe you were a quiet drunk who passed out and, or maybe you cried a lot, or maybe you got really dramatic and screamed all the family truths. Whatever it is, your family most likely is going to feel more comfortable if you would just go back to that role. And Harriet Lerner says, like, no matter what the role is, even if it's like a sacrificing caretaker, a martyr, your family likes that you stay in that role because it keeps the system balanced. And, she also talks a lot about anger. And I was really angry in early sobriety. So this was something that I found her work to be very helpful. And one of the things I love is that she talks about anger isn't a problem, it's information. It's the signal that there's a boundary being crossed or a need isn't being met. And in sobriety, I finally learned to listen to that anger instead of numbing it with Pinot Grigio. And once I listened to it, I could start changing the dance. And what I mean by that is the twist of all of this is it's really hard to forgive your family unit and to see them for what they are until you forgive yourself. And for me, my anger in the beginning was my way of avoiding that pain that I was feeling and the deep sadness and that my inability to forgive myself. And so for me, practicing self compassion was like my very first step in all this. I had to learn to forgive myself for the chaos, and especially around the holidays, as I entered into those rooms on Thanksgiving and Christmas, and all the memories popped up of the years past that I showed up drunk in a Santa suit, that I puked all over, that I put my car in the ditch, that I started a food fight. Just some of the things. You know, all those old memories. I had to start learning to forgive myself for that stuff. Because I can tell you over the years with my drinking, and especially over the holidays, you know, I broke a lot of trust. I let a lot of people down. I ruined a lot of family Christmases. There were nights that I completely just checked out. And once I gave myself some grace for that in the healing and in the recovery, then I could sort of look at my family differently. And then here's the other crazy part is I realized that they were stuck too, right? They were kind of stuck in their roles. And my mom silence in the beginning, maybe not wanting to talk too much about my sobriety or my dad not wanting to mention it. It wasn't indifference. It was a bit of fear of the unknown. You know, Today I don't frame my dad's drinking as he's a selfish asshole, but that's his own family pain. And sobriety's given me like a new set of glasses so that I can look at that and see my family as the human beings that they are behind the roles. And of course, as we get older, I consider myself somewhat middle aged. I mean, I'm 46 years old. Hopefully, I live to 90. That would put me right smack dab in the middle. But as we get older, we certainly are able to look at our family members differently, especially our parents, as we've parented ourselves. But it doesn't excuse everything, right? It was still necessary for me to set boundaries. Boundaries were still absolutely necessary because when you have your boundaries with, you combined that with your sobriety and your compassion, then you move from that place of blaming everyone to being more understanding. And I can tell you, it's a lot more healing than just going at these family events with annoyance, disgust, frustration, loneliness, crying. A couple years back, I went to a geneticist, because a physician that specializes in family genealogy, because my mother had breast cancer in her 40s. And so, of course, I am very likely to also have breast cancer in my 40s. And at the time, I was really hung up on I would test myself for the BRCA gene and, like, cut my boobs off like Angelina Jolie did, and that would really, like, ward it off at the pass. But I didn't really wanna cut my boobs off. I mean, I've had fake boobs since, like, 2005, and I love them. But You sit down with this provider who goes over this big, giant family genogram. It's like a family tree. It has all these arms and it's very complex. It looks like an algorithm. And you go way back into family members, great aunts and grandmothers and people that you don't really think about. In fact, I had to really kind of like scramble my brain and think, wait, who was my dad's mom's dad? Like who was and ask family questions and really go back. And of course, we went back a lot more on the woman's side of things, because duh, I'm not going to get breast cancer from my dad. But when I finally sat down with her and we looked at all that, and I'm what 3 years sober, 4 years sober at this time, it was so fascinating to me because what I saw was a family genogram, like, and, like, generations of, like, I saw pain and times of poverty, times of family deception. There were wars, and there were my mom and my grandma, and they're fighting for civil rights. And some of my grandparents immigrated from Canada. There was lots of illness, there was death, there was all the things that that weave into the tapestry of your family. And yeah, I can look at it like, fuck, so many times they zigged when they should have zagged, right? But somehow there's this beautiful, messy family unit out of all of it. And sobriety has taught me to look at people like humans and forgive and understand they're just doing the best they fucking can. They don't understand sobriety. They don't understand addiction. I mean, did you, before you were on this journey? Let's be completely real and honest here. Before you decided to get sober, did you ever think about those people who have to go to AA and can't drink alcohol? And no, if you're anything like me, you sipped your wine and did the othering just like everyone else. Well, I'm not those people. I'm not like that. I was a nurse for 17 years before I even looked at addiction as a possibility, and before I began to even understand that it happens to everyone. So remember to go a little easy on your family for their own fucking ignorance here. And of course, it's not about you. It's about the role you played, and it's about everyone's own pain and their own stories, right? We think about our own pain. We know our own pain so intricately. I've said this before. We know the depths of our own pain and our own story, but we often forget about other people. I mean, that's human nature, right? We think about everything from our perspective. So that's just kind of my insight on going through this journey. Of course, there's a million stories I could tell you about family events. In the beginning, like I said, I really just wanted them to talk about it. I just wanted someone to bring it up at the table. I wanted the chance to be brave and tell everybody, yeah, I'm sorry, I did that, but I've changed. But that's not the way it worked. There was a lot of silent Christmases where I had to just kind of eat crow and not drink and walk the walk instead of talk the talk. And that was hard. Um, but you know how you get through that when no one in your family's making you a casserole for getting sober, or maybe they don't even remember your sobriety date because it's not on their radar? You stay close to your sober tribe. You know, you go to meetings every single freaking day if you have to over the holidays, twice a day, 3 times a day. I can remember listening to audiobooks on repeat, and I've said this a million times before on this podcast. There were audiobooks I listened to, some of them, Quit Lit, Sobriety, some not, but I listened to a lot of Elizabeth Gilbert. I listened to Holly Whitaker, I listened to Laura McCowan, and it was something about their voice that reminded me of my people. It reminded me of meetings, right? Listening to Laura McCowan, it wasn't so much that I needed to hear the story of We Are the Luckiest. I mean, I kind of already heard the story. It was her voice. Her voice reminded me of TLC meetings. They reminded me of finding TLC at 2 years sober in the dead of the pandemic in the winter and crying on my first meeting, and then meeting Tammy Scott in person in Seattle and all these TLC people. Every time I turned that audiobook on and heard Laura's voice, it reminded me of meeting random strangers in Seattle from TLC and dancing and having a dance party and laughing really hard and joking about being white girl wasted. I mean, that's what that voice reminded me of, right? And listening to Holly Whitaker, I thought about her voice reminded me of the first time I met my friend Hillary in Seattle. It felt like a blind date, like we were set up on a date or we'd been chatting on the internet, and we were both brave enough to meet each other in person, and I bought her a tube of lipstick, a person I've never met, by the way, like, who does that? That totally wasn't her color. She's a blonde and very tan and very Scandinavian, but anyway, just for some reason, Holly Whitaker's voice reminded me of that time. You know, I even listened to "You're a Badass at Making Money" by Jen Shapiro on repeat because her voice reminded me of a sober trip I took once to LA to visit one of my favorite mentors and artist, Catherine Just, who's in long-term sobriety. And we had long conversations about entrepreneurship and financial literacy and recovering from financial issues once we get sober, and she recommended that I check out that book. I mean, just the voice of someone reading a book, you know? And one more example, and I'm not gonna go on and on about these examples, but how important it is to ground yourself in your people by listening to something. I mean, maybe you even listen to this podcast and you listen to me rant, and it helps you remember why you started, right? That we're all here cheering for you. I can remember being a part of an old group called the Sober Mom Squad, which is not around anymore. And Celeste Yvonne was one of the meeting hosts. She's the author of It's Not About the Wine. She's a very celebrated author. And she played this Taylor Swift song. It was mid-pandemic. It was a dark, rainy day. And I remember Taylor Swift singing, "This Is Me Trying." And all of us listened. And for that winter, I played on repeat, "This is me trying," and it reminded me of my girls, my crew, my OG SMS crew, right? And of Celeste and the words and the song and all of it. So find something that grounds you in your people and your why, and stay as close to that as you can during the holidays. You know, we know that your sobriety is gonna change the system, and that's uncomfortable as fuck sometimes. But that's also how a generational cycle gets broken. And, maybe one day your Aunt Linda will put her Riesling down and try the LaCroix. And even if she doesn't, you've already changed the trajectory of your family. You've already changed the dance. And this is another thing I want to bring up is inevitably, no matter what, you are changing your family. You are changing the game. I can tell you my own story and countless other women's stories of this domino effect of their sobriety. I quit drinking, then my sister quit drinking, then my mom, then my stepdad, then her friend, then my aunt, and then I said it on social media, and my old friend from high school, and so on, and so on, and so on. And I've told clients over the years, you could never possibly imagine the impact your sobriety is going to have. It's so hard to zoom way out and imagine the ripple effect. But I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt, you're impacting your family. Even if one aunt, one great grandmother, one niece or nephew is watching, somewhere down the road, you're going to be the first phone call they make when their kid or their neighbor's kid or they themselves gets a DUI or they can't quit drinking or they hit their rock bottom. And it will baffle you that you came this far on this journey thinking that you were alone and that the ripple effect, gosh, if I could give you a crystal ball into the ripple effect. So keep that in mind over the holidays as you're going into these family events and family events in general, right? Um, so if your family hasn't clapped for you, if they don't remember your freaking soberversary, or they guilt trip you, or they act like nothing's changed, you know, anchor in and remember that you're changing the trajectory. Of course, remember it's not about you. It's the whole family system, and they're doing what they do. They're scrambling to keep that old story alive, that old dance. I mean, we love sameness as human beings. Even if it's chaotic and fucked up and unhealthy, it's the devil we know and we love it. So, as much as you can, anchor into your why. Try not to rely on external validation, even though that's really hard. And if you need external validation, know where to go. Go where you are celebrated with your sober group. You know, they say, go where you're celebrated, not tolerated. And Dr. Bowen would say, stay differentiated. That's certainly not my term, but try to stay yourself while also staying connected. And as you know, Harriet Lerner says, use that anger as information. It's not always bad, it's often a guide, and practice compassion. But that compassion starts with yourself. It starts with forgiving yourself. It starts with saying, you know what, I'm human and I'm doing the best I can here. And I forgive myself for being human and making a shitload of mistakes that I can't take back, right? I can't take it back. I mean, I have the word now tattooed on my right hand, and it's because I can't even take back 5 minutes ago. You know, the things I said or did on the phone to my husband, or maybe I cut my mom off on a conversation, all I have is now. And so there has to be some self-compassion there. And you can understand yourself and you can understand your family without excusing their bullshit. You know, you can zoom way out in your family's genogram. You can see their pain in their stories. And that doesn't mean you have to let your boundaries down. It just means maybe you're growing and maturing and sobering up and, you know, you're seeing your family for what they are. So I hope some of this resonated. I hope it hit home. Thanks for hanging out with me today. If you've got a friend or someone navigating all this family stuff in recovery, send them this episode. Join our sobriety group. You know, the link's in the bio to join my Rewired Sober group. We meet live every week so that we can stay connected. There's a private Facebook group. And also, you continue to get videos created by me sent to your portal. And so you always have something to learn and to grasp onto and on the journey. And so I, of course, it's my group. I highly recommend it, but I highly recommend staying connected in general. And just remember, you don't need your family's applause to prove your progress here. You know, you're already rewriting the script for your family's story. And I'm super proud of you. So keep going. Thanks for tuning in to Rewired Sober. You can find me on my Instagram at Rewired Sober, where there are links to catch up with me and all the things I'm working on in my coaching business, or the link tree to my business directly will be in the show notes. I so appreciate you joining me on this journey, and I welcome any feedback or any topics you want to hear about, things that you're struggling with or interested in. I love you all so very much, and I'm just so enjoying doing this with you.